instead of bring up slides this time, I figured I'd show you our community page. But we do have a community page for the Digital Services Forum. And I'll give you the link in the chat to this About page. And what this has is if you go to our blog, every week after the meeting, so if you miss one of the meetings, the recordings from all of our past meetings, along with any of the content, whether the content's a deck or an update set, they'll be listed underneath this blog piece. And so if you go back, you'll see all the previous recordings up here. So that's a good way to get to the content and the video in one area. Okay, and I wanted to update you a little bit too on the piece here, because I know some of you are using the shared instance. So one of the things on the home page that I'm going to give you is that you'll see that we offer, besides this meeting and besides this community here, what we offer is a shared instance that we put stuff on. So I recently got rid of the shared instance we had. So this get link to our shared instance will still get you there, still send an email to me, but I migrated everybody's accounts to a new instance. And I know, Lou, I see you on there. I know a couple of times that old instance got a little slow. So it's been about every year and a half that I've created a new instance and started from scratch. So it's now DS Forum is our shared instance. And like I said, your old passwords will work. If you have an issue with your old password, just shoot me an email and I'll get you log in to this one. And just so everybody knows, when you do get these accounts, you'll be an admin. So as an admin, you'll be able to go ahead and get access to anything that we've showed on the call. So with that, today's content, we're going to go through some financials for digital products. And we have some guest speakers on today. We're going to start out with Charles and then go into, I think, Proven Optics has some tag teams that they're going to go back and forth and talk about digital products as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Charles and let Charles kick us off with some foundational information on the financials.
Hi, I'm Charles Bartley. I'm an enterprise architect with ServiceNow. Let me get this shared out.
Perfect.
And I'm going to go off video while I'm presenting because you guys just don't need to see my face for that. So what I want to talk to you about is money and product management and some techniques for understanding your organization and how to use that understanding to get the investment your product needs. So to start out, I'm going to pick up kind of where we left off last week or 2 weeks ago when John was speaking about digital product management in the context of federal, state, local governments and how tax money funds the digital products in those environments and all of that. We had a lot of questions around what is a digital product. So the definition that I'm using comes from the Open Group, and it's a service, physical item, digital item that provides an agreed and specific outcome for the customer that incorporates and requires software to realize that outcome, that is expected to require active management of the software by a provider over its life cycle, and that is described by a formal offer of value that typically includes explicit pricing. So I took this straight from the Open Group, didn't add or change anything. There are other definitions of a digital product. That's one of the things the Open Group's working on doing, is kind of growling a bunch of the different definitions. This is the one I'm going with. So services can be a digital product, applications can be a digital product, or they can both be parts of a digital product. A digital product could be, like, for example, a modern car that has software. The key thing there is the software, and the code that makes that run is an integral part of delivering that product or service. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. Obviously, there's a lot more to a car than software. One of the questions we got last week was, what's the difference between project management and product management? And there's whole books on this. Mick Kernstein, Project to Product, is probably the most well-known book. This is just kind of a quick summary here. I'm not going to drain the slide exhaustively. What it really comes down to is with a project, your project has a start date, it's got an end date, it's got a scope. And when you deliver that scope, typically whatever you developed is going into sustaining. Whereas a product has a life cycle, and that's going to go from ideation to initial construction to offering that product on the market. It's going to whoever your customer base is. It's going to last multiple iterations of that product, most likely. Eventually, that product's going to be sunsetted and retired. You're talking a much longer time frame with product management than you are with project management. Remember, projects, you get to the end of your project, you've met your scope, your project shuts down, whatever you've had enter sustaining. Product management, you're going the whole entire life cycle. A couple of observations on this. When an organization is used to estimating and funding for projects and they start switching to product management, one of the things I've observed is there's sticker shock. Like, you are used to these comparatively small, compact projects, and all of a sudden you're doing full life cycle out 5, maybe even 10 years for other products, maybe even longer. And you're trying to include all the costs, the delivery costs, the sustaining costs, all the rest of that with the product. Your product estimate is going to be drastically higher than your project estimate. You're still really talking the same money. You're just looking at it holistically from the beginning. My role has often been as enterprise architect. So I get involved. I've not been a product owner, product manager directly myself, but what I've done a lot in my career is worked with product managers to figure out what it's actually going to take to deliver their product idea, try to figure out what that holistic life cycle looks like, try and figure out those costs, and then try and figure out how to get the investment for it. Hot off the presses here, I just got finished talking with Mark Bodman in our next Digital Services Forum, November 9th. He's going to be talking about enterprise architecture and its role in product management and helping to define and shape the product. So in some ways, I kind of wish we'd had that topic going today a little bit first, but it'll come next. So when you hear next week, what I'm presenting here very much, or 2 weeks from now, what I'm presenting here very much fits in with that, trying to figure out that full life cycle, trying to figure out those fully loaded costs, and trying to get somebody to fund it. So there's something I call the product owner hustle. And products can start because someone's got an idea or there's a need or an opportunity. It could start because, like, you've got an idea for digital transformation. It could start from business demand. It could start from looking at the customer market that you're trying to address. There's all sorts of ways it starts. Really, if you're a product owner, your first priority is trying to understand your customers' needs and the opportunity that you see to address that. You got to have an idea on how to meet that need. You got to get the money to fund your idea. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on for the rest of this session right now. Then you got to build and deliver on your idea, and you keep repeating that until your product is no longer relevant enough to fund. So with product management, like I said, you're going for funding for the full life cycle, and you want sustained funding. You don't want funding for an MVP and then no funding after that. That's not product management. It is possible you pitch something that's going to have a multi-year life cycle, and you get to your MVP and your sponsors say your product isn't delivering on that opportunity. We choose to no longer fund it. So with product management, if you're not delivering value, if you're not perceived as going the right direction, funding can be cut, but funding should always be sought after with a longer time horizon. So like I said, I'm going to focus on how to get the money to fund your idea here. So this is a useful exercise to assist with that whole business case, your product development case. I developed this after some leadership training at one of my former employers, where they were really talking about IT's role in the business and how that connects. So a lot of what you're going to see here is technique that I've worked out for my use. It's not formal architecture. It's not complex. I would say like the drawings I'm going to show you here are architunes. They don't have specific meanings to them. This is a thought exercise that I just happen to think by drawing. So I start by plotting where I am with the product that I'm trying to pitch in relationship to where cash enters your enterprise. And there's a lot of ways cash can enter your enterprise. That could be taxes. If you're a government, it could be tuition. If you're a university, it could be venture capital funding. It could be selling of products and services. I was in manufacturing. So for the rest of this, you're going to see kind of a manufacturing idea. But whatever those sources of cash are, it can even be like chargeback or showback. Wherever those cash sources are, put those on the far left side of your drawing and put you on the right side. Next, you're going to plot your intermediate points between you and the point that cash entered the organization. So first step is I go up my own reporting chain and I get the org that I'm a part of. Next, I go to their boss, which in my organization was another VP for the major business unit that I was a part of. And then each hop to the left of where I'm at is another major org led typically at my company led by a VP until I get to the operating unit that directly brings in the cash. I'm going to label each of those hops between the orgs with what the org to the right does for the org to the left. I'm going to identify the stakeholders, budget holders for each of those hops. I'm going to find out what each of those stakeholders care about, their visions, their drivers, their goals, their outcomes. And then I'm going to use this knowledge to craft my investment request and deliver value messages to them. So this is my example. Yours will look different. You aren't going to have the same number of hops in a different organization from what I have here, but you'll see the behavior here and you'll see the thought pattern. So here on the left, I'm in manufacturing with some services. So dollars come in when products and services go out. Over here on the right was me at an earlier point in my career where I was portfolio manager for IT management tools. So my org, IT management tools, was a part of an IT infrastructure operations group. We supported application IT. So these would be like product development, using the word product too much, let's say like supply chain IT, finance IT, HR IT, all the rest of that, supporting the different business functions. Those business functions supported manufacturing. So I started with money, put me, drew the intermediate organizations in between. The next step is I'm drawing what each of these do for the other. So in IT management tools, I supported the ServiceNow platform, and we're providing IT tooling. And our primary customer was IT infrastructure operations. IT infrastructure manages the IT infrastructure and the common services. Their primary customer is the application IT. The application IT manages the apps for the business functions. The business functions do their function to support manufacturing, and manufacturing actually built the products. And then we also had service delivery in there too. So this is the basic connectivity between money and me in one of my previous organizations. You commonly hear about the business and IT. For my example, IT's these left three, and the business is the right two. Now, as an IT person, as an enterprise architect, IT is part of the business too. But when you're in IT and you're talking about the difference between IT and business, this would be where the drawing line is. In my org, everything from the business functions through IT management tools was considered overhead. And what do you do with overhead? You ruthlessly minimize it. So cost reduction is the main business case driver for all of the orgs outside of manufacturing. They want costs to go down too, but they also care about other things. They care about the quality of the products they're producing. They care about customer satisfaction, a whole bunch more stuff than just doing what they do at the least possible cost. So then next I mapped out who the major players were for each of those groups. For my immediate group, it was a director. All the rest in my company were VPs. Your titles may vary. This is where then, when I'm trying to make a business case to fund something in IT management tools, I now know who the major players are. And coming up here, I can see what they're doing for the business, and I can craft my messaging to them to appeal to their interests. And we'll put ServiceNow in because we're actually part of this whole chain too, as we're a supplier of IT tools for IT tool management. For me, ServiceNow was one of many platforms I managed at that point in my career. So there's some behavioral rules that you can use in this type of diagram that help you with your communications. First off is people can only see 0 to 2 hops in either direction of where they're at. So coming back here as an IT tooling person, I knew what was going on with ServiceNow because I attended knowledge and saw all of that stuff. I knew what IT infrastructure needed from me. I knew what app IT needed from me. I had ideas about what manufacturing and the business functions cared about, but I didn't really know anybody in those organizations. They're too far away from me. I didn't know what their latest goals and objectives were from their VPs. That wasn't a part of the circle that I had in my visibility. If I were sitting here in this app IT area, so it's like, let's say I'm trying to provide supply chain management tools. I know what supply chain management cares about. I know why manufacturing cares about supply chain. I know about infrastructure operations. I know about IT management tools. I'm probably not up to date on what's the latest widget that just came out from ServiceNow. So that first pattern is you can see 1 to 2 hops away from where you are. The next one, root causes of issues are commonly addressed 0 to 2 hops to the right of where you're at. So coming back here, if I'm in application IT and I've got a problem with, like, let's say my DevOps tool chain, it could be my people aren't using it right. It could be I don't have the right services being offered by the infrastructure operations group. It could also be I don't have the right actual tooling for that coming from the tooling group. So root causes are commonly 0 to 2 hops away. You're going to look to there to fix it. The benefits of initiatives are typically felt 1 to 2 hops to the left from where you're at. So if I'm sitting here in IT management tools, and let's say we roll out virtual agent for chat for supporting incident management, the IT management tool group is going to have an expenditure there because they have to stand up that tool and they have to do all the development for it. Who's going to benefit from it? It's going to be IT infrastructure operations, which is where our help desk was. It's going to be the app IT people who are going to have higher degrees of case deflection. And very vaguely, the business function people might realize, hey, their incidents are getting resolved a little bit faster, but they're not going to really know why. It's going to be app IT and IT infrastructure operations that are going to really see the direct value from whatever I did with incident management and virtual agent. Your money always flows from the left to the right, and your value delivery flows from the right to the left. One last property of this, the closer you are to the money, the easier your business case or value case is going to be to make. The farther you are from where the money comes in, the harder it is. So in my world here in the IT management, my business cases were all about cost reduction. I could talk about operational efficiencies. I could talk about risk reduction, that sort of thing. But those weren't nearly as pervasive stories as sheer cost reduction, because again, in this org, IT tools are viewed as overhead. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of blow through this quiz a little bit, where I'm going to pop the questions up. I'm going to spend just a little bit of time there, and then we're going to go right to the answers. I thought about doing this as a poll, but it was going to take too long, and we want to get to the second half of the show today. So these questions are all using this basic format to start answering questions that will help you craft better business investment cases. So let's say I'm working on a CSDM implementation effort. Which hops care about that CSDM implementation effort? If you remember, the rule is your benefits are felt 1 to 2 hops to the left of you. So the answer here is your app IT people, your infrastructure operations people, and your IT management tools people care about your CSDM. If you start going to a business function like supply chain or finance or HR, or even worse, into the manufacturing programs, and you start saying, my CSDM project needs funding, they're going to laugh you out. For one, they don't know what CSDM is. They don't care about it. It's not a relevant message to them. Question number 2, which hops care about reducing the number of unplanned manufacturing operations impacting outages? My answer here is going to be every hop. Manufacturing cares about it because they want to keep their product lines going. They don't want them stopped by systems outage. Your business functions care because they can't have the interruption that's impacting manufacturing. Goes all the way down. Even your vendor cares about it, ServiceNow in this case. Everybody's going to care about those unplanned outages. If you want to improve your DevSecOps, ITSM, ITOM for the app IT group, where should we be investing? Remember that principle, your root cause of issues is 0 to 2 hops to the right. So you could be investing in app IT, saying they've got to do DevSecOps, ITSM, ITOM better. They need better adoption of those. They need better training. It could be your IT infrastructure services, the help desk, the monitoring services, your ITOC, if you've got those, your change management, all the rest of that, how those are practiced. It could be a tooling issue. These are the groups that are going to care about that. Again, the groups to the left, the business-facing functions aren't going to care about those initiatives. They're going to care that app IT gets better at what it does. They're not going to care how it got better. So again, this is all trying to help you craft your right message to the right people for the initiative you're going for. Question number 4, who will experience the benefit from improving? Well, I just kind of answered that. App IT gets better at doing those things. These guys are going to feel the benefit of it. They're not going to know or care how. They just care they got the outcome, that this app is meeting its SLA. It's having the right uptime. It's not doing business impacting outages. It's meeting the needs of the business. That's what they're going to care about. That's what your messages should focus on. And then the last question, who will experience the implementation and operations burden of having improved all of those? And it's back to these left 3. So the benefits are felt over here on the left. The costs are felt on the right. There's an inherent mismatch between that. The people who are bearing the burden of the cost don't feel the benefit. The people that are getting the benefit don't know or care why the cost happened. They just care they got what they needed from this group that they did know about. So as a closing observation, and then we'll go over to proven optics. If you're a platform product or platform owner for ServiceNow, and you're having a lot of problems getting appropriate funding for your business cases, maybe you can get better results by working with stakeholders much further to the left of you than you're used to doing. So I'll come back here to the whole deal. If my whole world here is I'm supporting these 2 functions, I'm always going to be trapped in that overhead. If I can make plays that tap into these left 2 most chevrons, that's where now all of a sudden the business cares about me. So even though it's a risk avoidance case, that reducing unplanned outages, that's a potent thing. Manufacturing does not want their product lines to be stopped. If I can be saying we can help with the various business functions IT. We can do workflow for supply chain for the rest of those. I might get funding that in turn can help me do the work back here better, more efficiently as part of the deal on the way. The bottom line here is the more relevant you are to the business, the easier it is to get sustained funding. I guess one last little deal. This was my pattern. There are other patterns here. Like if I were in a company making software directly for sale to consumers, like ServiceNow, I would make it there's one hop between me and the money. We've got our product dev that makes the product, and then it's sold it and you buy it from us. It could be like if I'm here in supply chain IT, I've got three hops. I got supply chain IT, I've got supply chain, the business function, and then I've got the manufacturing. Your versions of this might have classes, it might have medical services, whatever. That's where the money comes in and the products and services go out. Your model will be different than mine, but I hope you can see how this technique helps you better understand your business. I print this out, I put it on my wall. When I'm making business cases, I'm constantly thinking, what do each of those players at each of these hops think? It's gotten me a lot more success. Hopefully it will for you too. Any quick questions before we turn over to proven optics?
Nothing in the chat right now, Charles, but yeah, if you could monitor the chat for a little bit and see if any pop up, that'd be great.
Will do.
Definitely got my head spinning. So Kyle, you taking over, or Ed?
Yeah, I have a couple slides here, John, and thanks for going through that, Charles. I'll start my share here, and I imagine Ed will. Ed, are you on as well?
I am, and John and team, thank you for having us, and look forward to the discussion to talk about, managing the financials and the costs around digital products. So, yep, looking forward to the conversation. So, thank you.
Great. So, I'll kick us off here, John. Quick time check. About 15 minutes, I believe, to get through.
You got the whole rest of the time, Kyle. Really. Yep. So,
all right.
As much as you need, and then we could open up for questions. There's definitely some good discussion around this that we should be able to have.
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, thanks everybody for giving us the opportunity to present in front of you. As John and Charles both mentioned, I am with Proven Optics. My name is Kyle Holetz. I lead our solution consulting team here. As far as what I had planned and discussing with everybody today, this isn't meant to be salesy. It's not meant to be a product pitch, right? It's really about how do we enhance that digital product planning, costing, and explicit pricing examples that John and Charles have went through so far with a flexible taxonomy built on the ServiceNow platform, right? Being that digital products can exhibit a lot of different characteristics. The way I think of them is they're groupings of unlike things, right? Hardware, software, services, and then they're consumed across the business. And I think Charles did a really good job explaining kind of where that money lies, and where we talked about cash moving horizontally. I'm going to do my best to talk about how within Proven Optics, cash kind of moves vertically in a sense throughout a cost model, and we'll discuss some of those things. So as far as the agenda, you can see it on the screen here. I don't want to read them one by one, but I like to keep these very fluid, very conversational. So if there's any questions at all, please feel free to stop me and ask away. So where we're going to start out is within that digital product sort of financial planning process. Charles, you talked about funding. I'm going to call that budgeting and planning for today. Once we receive our funding that's going to fund the initiative, the digital product that we're going after, we have to budget for that 5-year period. We have to figure out how we're going to plan not only for the costs that are coming in both a direct and indirect concept, but also who's going to consume my product. Right, that planned consumption can be very important. And then it's a measuring stick when we understand once those fiscal periods actually hit, where people are consuming my product at whatever sort of unit type that may be. It could be a license, could be a transaction, right? There's a lot of different ways that product can ultimately be consumed. But we want to be able to clearly measure, how close to the mark were we based on that capacity that we ultimately planned. So that's on the far left here, intentionally. The next step after planning is, of course, costing. How much does it really cost to provide my digital product? And this is, I think, where we hear a lot from clients around data, right? We don't have the data that we need to do this. And one of the things that I want to discuss today, once we hit the model taxonomy, is that's where that flexibility comes into place, because we want to be able to have digital products are meant to evolve, right? Charles, you mentioned these are things that are going to be in your ecosystem for 5-10 years over a life cycle, not necessarily a start and end date like a project. And having a flexible taxonomy that allows me to evolve my product, see where there's inefficiencies within that quote unquote overhead realm, where can I improve that product's operating sort of efficiencies, whether that be, you know, moving away from on-premise capabilities to cloud capabilities to provide my product, and how do we visually, you know, see those things and then create a plan of attack to you know, improve the efficiency of that product. And then lastly, on the far right, once we plan, once we figure out what it actually costs us, now we need to set our rates. What is that explicit pricing that we want to justify to our consumers of those digital products? So that's another measuring stick, right? We might have a budgeted unit cost that we see we were way off of when our actuals start coming in. So that explicit pricing is critical, and having these three pieces kind of work together is very important as we kind of think of this as in a process perspective. Because our customers want defensible and transparent pricing, right? They want to know and understand what they're, you know, paying for, and they might not care about all the pieces that go into that product, right? They just know that they're consuming a particular product. John, I think you used the citation example in an earlier session, right? That's all the customer knows. They don't know that there's Amazon EC2 servers and applications under the hood of that, whatever it may be. So we can see an example of that here, and I kind of wanted to use this as an overview that will now guide us through the preceding slides. But I want to pause and see if there's any questions. John, any points you'd like to make, Charles, or even Ed?
Yeah, I like the, a lot of people think we're moving away from service management when we do product management. And I hopefully that definition Charles put up in the beginning calls that out a little bit, because you have like service TCO. Right, we could start with service TCO, and then
right.
you know, so I love how it all comes together. And a service could be a product, right?
It
or
could be.
an application could be a product. So you know, that's the way everybody's thinking. I think the slide speaks to that really well too.
And I think it's all about, to your point earlier, John, we spoke earlier, it's a tagging mechanism. What sort of metadata do we want to put against those pieces? It could be hardware, it could be server utilization, it could be an application license, it could be a true business service. And all of those things are tagged with a digital product line. Then we get the reporting that we ultimately want out of it, and the Lego bricks, if you will, of what makes up that digital product.
Yep. And that all the levels I think work really well, because you're not talking about, hey, because I'm doing network delivery, how do I account for the electricity in the data center? Well, if you're consuming those sub products, you don't really have to account for those, right? It's wrapped in another product. So I'm not actually paying for electricity, but I'm paying for a product that is using electricity.
So I got a quick preview of what Mark Bodman's going to be talking about for our next session on the 9th. And that session is going to focus on like enterprise architecture and how it fits into product management. One of the slides in there, he has talks to some of the questions that are going on in the chat, where there's multiple types of products at play across the ServiceNow platform. So like most fundamentally, what most of you probably know are the asset management products, or hardware and software products that have makes and models and versions. That's one form of product. Then there's the digital product that we're talking here, which are those apps and services that you're building and delivering to the consumers of those apps and services. And then there's the products that your company makes, or products and services, I'll say, that your company makes for external consumption. And those might also be digital products. So there's multiple definitions of the word product here. We're talking the middle one most explicitly in this, because we're talking like your financial processes and stuff inside your company. The rest of that, the other definitions, they're related concepts. There's definitely some overlap, and that's part of what folks are trying to straighten out in the various standards forums and such. So I think Mark, he's commenting a little bit there in the chat right now. He'll talk a little bit more about that next week too. So just keep in mind for this one, put your blinders on. We're talking your digital products and services that you're delivering within your company or organization. At least that's sort of the main focus.
Right.
Back to you.
Yeah, they know, great points. I appreciate it. So where we're going to start out is on that far left chevron in the budget and planning area. So again, keeping this focused on outputs or outcome as opposed to being product or application focused in this case. What I wanted to talk about here was really around planning for digital products and how it aligns to the 5 core personas of digital product delivery: that product manager, liaison, architect, developer. Within this sort of data flow, right, they all have a piece of the puzzle. And you can almost imagine where those people might come into this process. So when we're thinking about those digital products, they're not singular. Now, some may be singular. So if I'm a product manager or an architect who needs to understand what the costs are, I need to know what pieces make up what I'm budgeting for: people's time, licenses, infrastructure costs. Many products might have all of those components. Others may be more singular in a sense. So having a way to necessarily group all of those pieces together and their explicit costs is really kind of what we're looking at here when we think about drafting those budget lines and the subcomponents that are a part of that digital product. Now, as we move further to the right, this is where we really start to bring in actual costs. So as we're planning for those digital products, and customers, you do this a lot of different ways that we've seen, as far as how do I match actual expense to my budgeted plan for that particular product, so I can understand not only where are we burning too fast, where are we burning too slow, how is that consumption of my product ultimately affecting spend for that actuals versus budget sort of comparison. This is an interesting concept to me, because one of the things that we're finding at Proven Optics, especially in our EMEA market, and Charles, you stated it earlier, is when customers are budgeting, they take a very product-centric mindset. So we're seeing this a lot in EMEA, where it's so what we call service-based budgeting, right? Which is very similar to digital product-based budgeting, where I'm not budgeting for a cost center necessarily. I'm not budgeting for an application necessarily. I'm budgeting for the service that I own as that service, that product manager, service owner persona, and all of the pieces that are associated to that, whether it be direct costs that I can control, like people that work for me to provide that product or service, or things that are indirect to me, like the infrastructure that supports my service or product. So I wanted to hit on that and kind of bring up that relationship as well, that I kind of found interesting as we've learned, as I've learned more about the digital product taxonomy. Couple examples here that we wanted to go through now, just simply showing some of those variance items. Once we've defined what the pieces of that budget, of that plan are for the various products, they're delivering something, right? Could be a service. This could very likely also just be a product. As expenses are coming in, ideally they're tagged in one way, shape, or form based on vendor, cost center, a PO number, a doc ID. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And ultimately that allows us as a product manager or product owner to understand what is that actual spend, what is the variance that's going against my products. You can see that over here on the far right. And that's really where we can start to understand how consumption might change that actual variance, and also where we might have inefficiencies as those various expenses are tagged. Where are they coming from? I'll pause here and see if there's any questions from the last 2 slides.
Some of this will be brought up, I think, in the discussion next week too on IT for IT, where a lot of this budgeting is done at the portfolio planning level, the evaluate value stream, they call it.
Perfect. So now moving in, so we kind of talked about that first chevron on the far left, the budgeting and planning in a short example there, and kind of the data flow that it generally goes through. Now we're into the middle piece, kind of actually the middle and the far right from an explicit pricing standpoint. And that's what modeling provides, right? So what you're seeing on my screen now is an example model. Now, don't think this is what we call a TBM taxonomy. It's well known across the industry. But this isn't necessarily something that you have to follow, unless, of course, there's regulatory compliance reasons that you must, right? And this is in the beginning where I talked about evolution and flexibility becomes so critical, right? And when we think about this model, it's meant to fit you. It's meant to fit a digital product owner for their purposes. There's two types of information that come into this model, and this is where ServiceNow becomes so critical to modeling, because ServiceNow should be that IT operational source of truth. It should be the operational source of truth for your digital products and the pieces that go into it. So why not run your costing practices within that same area, right? It keeps your data cleaner. You don't have source of truth questions and things like that. And at the end of the day, you have more trustworthy information. So that's where you see on the far left, as we work to the right, you have ServiceNow data as a data source. When we think about services, apps, hardware that might be tagged with a digital product, generally there's a mapping as well. So if I think about groupings of CIs or service mappings within the CSDM or your CMDB, that can all be inherited into a cost model. So there's relationships that are inherently built as we move up and dollars move up vertically through that cost model. But also, I like, Charles, your example of hops to cash. And I think that this can be very similar in a sense, because depending at the level that my digital product lives, it could be the very top, right? A business service product. It could be an app. It could even be hardware down here in the technology device. That allocation to a customer of where is that digital product consumed is supported by the model here. So as an example, if we're providing hardware or big data storage service as a digital product, those objects might live down here in technology devices, and there's hopping all the way up past these segments to be consumed by clients. And their costs are everything below them. So Charles, very, very similar to the example that you had in a sense. We're just kind of flipping the model vertically in this case. Additionally, right, what are the outcomes of this? It's really all about cost visibility. What is that measuring stick? What's that benchmark? How close was I really to my plan, right? When we think about a planned unit cost to not only to deliver the product, but what's my capacity, right? Anytime we can define a capacity of how many digital products we can offer, the cost model is going to tell us how close were we to that capacity. And if I'm a digital product owner, right, that delta between the capacity that I can deliver and what the business is consuming is an area for improvement. As I map dollars to my model or to my digital product, we'll say it's up here in the business service level, we can also start to understand inefficiencies. So Charles, to your point earlier, that overhead area, right, as I look at that, really pretty much everything below business applications and down, those are areas where we have the opportunity to cut costs, whether it be infrastructure dollars, whether it be consultancy spend that's linked to a digital product. The model and the taxonomy here is meant to support those decisions and improve that visibility. Additionally, customers always ask us, when we're talking about cost modeling, we don't have all the data. Maybe we don't have all the data, or we don't have it all in ServiceNow. And that's where this is meant to be flexible, and it's meant to be evolutionary, right? Maybe we don't have all of the pieces that make up our digital product immediately. That's okay, right? Maybe we start with licensing and labor and some of those areas because we don't have great infrastructure data. The model is meant to be, use as many segments as you want. It's meant to be very flexible in a sense, and also help foster evolution, right? We think about what are gaps that we may have within that particular taxonomy. We have immediate areas for improvement that can be supported by a flexible and sort of evolutionary fostering model here. Any questions around the support of digital products within the cost model? Within a cost model?
I think that gets a little bit to, we had some questions on the cost of internal technical services. Hopefully this answers some of that on here. But
Absolutely.
I think there was some answers going on in the chat on the same thing you were talking about on here, which is really good.
Yeah, and if there's, I apologize, I'm not watching the chat, but if there's any in there, John, that I can answer, feel free to read them, or if anybody wants to come off mute and ask those questions.
Hey, Kyle, this is Ed. I just wanted to jump in. John, I and Charles were talking. John, do we want to talk about, as the cost is built out for these digital services, and then doing cost recovery as those digital services get delivered, or maybe table that for another session? The charge back and show back as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for the context of this one, the chargeback is the big thing, like how much we're charging people for things, because that's the idea, is that everything's bubbling up to that top level model, like products have products contained in them.
Right.
And the containment of those products and sub products, even the ServiceNow platform is a product. That is kind of what determines so it's mostly the chargeback, I think, for this one is the, if anybody else wants to, hear more about it. Anybody else disagrees, let me know, but.
Yeah. And I can hit on that quickly. I mean, one of the outputs of the model, or any sort of built model, based on the data that you're putting into it, should be some level of unit costing. A unit could be anything. How does your digital product get consumed? Is it a transaction? Is it an event? Is it a license? Is it, hard goods even that are produced that have software, that are a part of producing them? That unit cost is many times, and you can see that as an output over here. That should be an automated output of that model, right? I want to understand, I transacted 1,000 of these things this month. It cost me $1 million, and X is my unit cost for that, sort of P times Q rationale. The chargeback concept then really is just, well, are we trying to break even? Are we trying to be at 5%? Are we trying to be at, that golden zero at the end of the year, if we're just trying to cover our costs from an IT perspective? So it really is those two things put together. And I also have a slide here in a little bit that kind of shows a side-by-side comparison of, okay, I understand my average unit cost coming from my cost model. Depending on where I want to land as an organization, then my service rate should be, 3% uplift or the exact same. And a lot of that comes into, Charles, where you explain sort of the life cycle management of a digital product. That, in my mind, should be bullet points. They should be areas that we're focusing on and sort of right sizing those product offerings to make sure if our costs are going up or going down to deliver my product, well, my explicit pricing and rate that I'm charging from a chargeback perspective should be as well. But it should also be defensible and transparent as to why.
Yeah. So kind of tying this into my part of this, like when I'm first starting to sketch out, here's this needed product, and we're starting to build that case to go to the company for investment. Part of what you need is your cost model. Like, here's where we're anticipating costs to be born. And again, it's over the full life cycle. And so starting with a model like this makes that drastically easier than if your organization doesn't have a cost modeling taxonomy. This forces you to go in and ask all the right questions and figure out which of these boxes your parts play in. It helps keep you honest for estimating the cost. Mm-hmm. And then what you try and balance that with in your business case would be, here's our benefit statements. Here's the value delivery that by experiencing all this cost, you're doing it in the hope of getting this value to whoever the consumers of your digital product are.
Right. Yeah. And I always think back to the personas that you guys covered as well. And if I think about, what does this model do? It also brings people together. It helps us speak a common language across all of those personas and in a business friendly fashion.
Exactly.
I have a question.
Right. Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, going back to that slide, that is so high level that the ITSM or APM or ITOM or any of these areas in ServiceNow, my takeaway from this slide is that the unit costing and all those parts that are dollars are some object in ServiceNow. So for example, in ServiceNow, you have models, whether hardware or software, and it has cost. And models can publish, or catalog items we publish from models, and those catalog items you present via Employee Center, and they have price or price and recurring price. And then you have the purchasing model and service, the purchasing suite in ServiceNow, where you could do your POs, and again, all costing. And then if you bring in general ledger, all costing. So the question is, with this slide, right? This slide, the underpinning is assuming that the way ServiceNow has been designed, and all those objects, no matter what suite you're using, that has cost or price information. And in this previous slide that you showed earlier, where you were showing or presenting those costs in the dashboard, that's the expectation here, right? You're taking those objects that have price, cost, or whatever, and you're rolling that up in your digital products / service pipeline? Or is there something, other store app or from Proven Optics piece that is being used by ServiceNow that includes all that as a kind of a module plugin that's going to roll all that up, say, for example, to that other dashboard you were showing? I'm confused.
Yeah, and apologies for the confusion. I can try my best to lighten that. So in this case, you did call it out. So Proven Optics is a store application. So this is packaged functionality that can live on your ServiceNow instance, no different than APM, SPM, ITSM, whatever it is, right? Now, there is not an assumption from Proven Optics you own these things, right? And you said it as well, right? We're bringing in the truest form of financial data in this case from a best practice standpoint, from that general ledger, from that fixed asset ledger, from your procurement systems, all of those areas, right? And we're rolling those costs up through objects within the model that are informed by ServiceNow data, right? So when you look at each of these buckets, technical services, devices, business applications, in a utopia sort of state, all of these exist in ServiceNow. Now, we know that that's not always the case. We might need to ingest external data into the model from something like a plan view PPM solution, because we're not using ServiceNow PPM as an example. So the costs at the bottom, to your point, are absolutely meant to be rolled up and related to one another. And ultimately at that business service application and consumer level, we see all of the pieces put together. So ServiceNow is meant to inform, or our cost model within Proven Optics is meant to drive and inform relationships between objects. But at the top, we're understanding total cost of ownership, unit-based costing based on those relationships and allocations that are going up to a business or a business unit or customer. John, I don't know if you have anything there as well, or hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think we're talking about multiple sides, right? Is that where
Right.
we're talking about, hey, I'm a product manager and I want to see how much it costs, my unit cost for delivering my product. So I'm going to go get all these costs and then divide it by how many I expect to deliver. And then there's the charging side, right? Where I'm taking money in from that, whatever form that is, whether it's an internal chargeback or actually charging a customer where you're collecting a payment. So there's kind of all those different angles that you kind of consider. So what angle are you talking about, Lou? Are you talking about, I'm a product manager, I want to see how much it costs to sell these on a unit basis? Or
No, my apologies to all on the call, because that was the best answer of the day so far. So
Cool.
thank you.
Yeah, definitely the roll up of all the data coming from all those places. That's hard to do, is get that combined stuff. So cool.
All right.
The other thing I wanted to mention, I put a link to it in the chat. The offering that is defined when defining a service also captures cost. What's the unit? What's the cost? What is so there's already a mechanism to capture this information within the platform that I find many organizations don't do. And I think that is the best practice is to capture that data at each service offering level. So the link there will teach you how to do that.
Thanks, Mark.
Great. Thanks. All right. So I'll speed through this one. This slide is really then just meant to, Lou, to your point earlier, break down the big buckets of high level information, right? So when we think about what's included in each of these pieces, and I'm going to speed through this, right? This is meant to be defined by you, and it's meant to fit the digital product relationships that you want to drive up through the model and ultimately see costs represented in, right? All the way down to the bottom, where we're going to start to see things like app dev, app support time from the developers that are linked to my digital product, or groups like that, or consultants that may be even a part of the puzzle. Last thing that I wanted to point out, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions here at the end, is how this leverages the data model within ServiceNow, right? We are meant to inherit that data model. We come out of the box with a taxonomy and a best practice in a very prescriptive fashion, and a proven method to, of course, understand total cost of ownership, understand unit costs, and drive that charge back, that P times Q rationale that's going out to the consumption of my digital product. But keep in mind, this is meant to be defined by customers. So whether you're using CSDM or a particular data model, or haven't quite got there yet, the model is meant to be flexible enough to meet our client, meet you at the point of data maturity that you are. Lastly, this is one of the slides that I talked about earlier, understanding that unit cost against our service rate. So in the sense of a chargeback invoicing program, we can see, various cost drivers. These are our services. These are our digital products. How are they being consumed? Headcount, license user, allocated gigabyte. That's ultimately meant to be defined by the digital product being consumed and that product manager. And then, of course, who's consuming it. This is an agency, a business unit, it could even be an external company, right? And then we're, of course, driving that invoice. As you can see here, the rates are, of course, going to be rate times unit is going to be what you're going to find under that invoice in this case. And on the right, as a part of that life cycle management, as we're right sizing our offerings, as we're understanding what we want to charge in that explicit pricing sort of example and the definition that Charles gave earlier, we want to see those things side by side, right? Because as a part of that meeting, as a part of those quarterly, yearly planning sessions, we want to understand that average unit cost. When did it flux during the year, and what should drive my service rate?
Hey, Kyle,
Yeah.
couple questions. Is this list view part of your solution?
It is. Yep. I'm trying my best not to call out our applications and kind of focus on the outcomes and driving kind of the digital product methodology here. But yes, this is a part of this is more of the atomic level, Etta, I would say, than it is like the reporting that's the output of these items. But this is absolutely a automated output of our product. Yes.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss something that was like hidden in the platform that I had. I was like, okay, I've been there for a while. Okay. And then the other thing, and we haven't really addressed this, and maybe Mark will address it in his piece. We have this list, the breakdown of CapEx, OpEx.
Oops, sorry, was fishing for the mute button there. You absolutely could see those items under the hood for each of these things. This is more of I would say a summarization of a line. But if we were to look at that total amount, right, that's being driven or rolled up in this case to our business application, you would see a number of cost drivers underneath it, the pieces that make up that product offering, basically. And some of them may be defined as there could be project dollars going towards it that are defined as CapEx versus labor, which maybe, keep the lights on OpEx expenses.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
There's one more question on the chat that I think's relevant to get answered quickly. Does the TBM model mapping to CSDM come from your company, or where does that come from?
The TBM taxonomy?
The TBM to CSDM mapping slide that you had.
I think that was something that we put together with John and ServiceNow. I don't know if it was exactly John, but I know it was something that we put together with ServiceNow a while back. I think that even screenshot, to be honest, I'm not a CSDM expert, but I think it's even a little older. It's one of the older CSDM versions. It's really just meant to show conceptually that, look, if you're following this data model, the CSDM practice, there's a natural sort of flow and a natural architecture that can easily be inherited into a cost model, whether that cost model taxonomy is TBM or not, right? We have, as Proven Optics, right, TBM is kind of the industry standard out there. We did not come up with that. I'll be very honest. We have our own cost model taxonomy as well that a lot of our non-federal customers actually find a lot more value in. A little simpler, a little more efficient.
Yeah, I think Mark did that model last year to map TBM over to CSDM.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that one's a couple of years old actually, but yeah, and it needs to be revised. There's CSDM has evolved, and we also it's not all completely product centric yet. So that's really what we're going to be working over the next year to kind of simplify that model and bring it home to product centricity.
Sweet. Mark, maybe we can link up.
This is Alan Prohaska. That was my question. So that TBM comes from the industry, or that's just sort of tribal knowledge of, this is the way TBM looked to you guys, Kyle, when you were making up this diagram?
Nope. TBM is a industry standard. That does not come from us. That TBM taxonomy there is an industry standard that's out there.
Yeah, and let's be incredibly crystal clear though. It's a standard based on Aptio's product today.
Correct.
Okay, so it is Atom.
It is based
Atom.
on Atom,
Yep.
and they basically rule the roost in terms of TBM. They do not let others play and evolve that. That is something that the IBM acquisition may change in the future. But today, think of that as the TBM ATOM model from Aptio specifically.
Cool. We work with Adam, so I just wanted to make sure that that it was the same source. And Mark, that's the closest I've ever heard you sounding unhappy about something.
Yeah, I'm all for open standards, folks, so I just know that TBM currently is not all the players in the industry can actually help and influence and evolve that standard today.
Yeah, it's quite strict from what we've heard from a lot of folks as well, and can be hard to adopt to. And that's one of the benefits and big differentiators that we find working within the ServiceNow platform is just the general flexibility.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the questions.
All right, awesome stuff today, guys. Lots to talk about in this area, so that's a good start. All right, Charles, Kyle, Ed, thank you very much. And
Thanks,
Mark,
everybody.
we got a lot
Thanks for
to
the
add
inclusion,
on to
John.
here. All right.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.